it's Sid, and today I am here to do my birth story. So, my due date was Monday, November 5th, 2018, and that day came and passed. I was 40 weeks. I was trying to get myself to go into labor naturally, desperately, and nothing was working. I was doing exercise, and I was dancing, and I was sitting on my exercise ball, and just like everything that I could think that would like feasibly work to maybe put me into labor was doing nothing. I was having no contractions. I was having no Braxton Hicks. Nothing. Like, he was just pretty content in there. So baby boy decided that he didn't want to sleep in his crib and wanted to join us for this video. He should just be sleeping, so it should be fine. But anyway, yeah, so on Tuesday the 6th, I woke up with some, this is going to be a little bit TMI, I woke up with some discharge in my underwear, and feeling like really wet down there, and I was like, that's really strange, never had that before, but maybe it's like my mucus plug or something, like maybe that means that he's going to come soon. So went throughout my day, and then Wednesday the 7th I woke up with the same thing. Actually I'd woken up like kind of in the middle of the night too and had some of that, and I remember thinking like, this isn't, I don't know, this isn't quite normal, like this doesn't feel right to me. And so I thought about how when my mom was pregnant with me, I had actually managed to tear a hole in my like amniotic sac, and she started leaking fluid, and that's not good because then infection can get in there because the sac is open, and so she had to be induced with me. So I texted my mom and I was like, here's what's going on. Do you feel like this sounds like what happened when I was born? And she was like, I don't know, like I would definitely just, you know, email your doctor just to be sure, see what they want to do. So I was like, okay, so I emailed them, and I had like a full day planned. Like I was going to go to school, which is like 45 minutes away because I commute, and I was going to like go and do a bunch of homework because I was doing online classes, and I was going to like meet with my advisor and all of this and that. And I was like, whatever, okay. It was like early in the morning too. Me and my friend were gonna go. And so I emailed them, and then I was still gonna go to school. So it was probably like 8:30 when I emailed them, and then it was like 9 o'clock. I was sat down in my car to go drive to meet up with my friend. And I was like, I'm gonna check my emails just in case. Like, I don't think they'll have gotten back to me yet, but we'll see. So I opened up my emails, and they had said, hey, like, we really just want you to come in if you can, and we're gonna test it just to be sure that it's not your amniotic fluid. So I was like, okay, so I canceled on my friend and said I can't come to school today, and I went to my doctor's office, and the whole way there I was like, this is just silly, like they're gonna think I'm just one of those moms that overreacts about everything. They're like, there's nothing wrong, it wasn't that much, like, you know. But I went anyway because I wanted to be sure. So I went and I had my appointment, and she was like, basically what I'm gonna do is open you up down there, I'm gonna take this test strip, and if it turns blue, then that's your amniotic fluid, and if it doesn't, then it's not. And I was like, okay. I was like, what happens if it does turn blue and it's amniotic fluid? And she was like, we would probably recommend that you go straight over to the hospital and get induced, just because it's been 24 hours and you haven't gone into labor, but your sac is open. So I was like, okay. So I hopped up on the table, she did what she said, and she like looked, and she was like, I see what you're talking about, but I think that it's probably your mucus plug. And I was like, okay. And then she goes, wait, maybe not. And I was like, what? And she like holds up the test strip, and it's blue, and I was like, oh my gosh, so that is my amniotic fluid. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, so that means y'all want me to go over and get induced today? And she was like, that is what we would recommend. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I started like freaking out. So I hop up, and she's like, I'm gonna call the midwife that's on duty over at the hospital and let her know that you're coming. But let her know that you're coming, but if you want to, like, you can go home, you can take your shower, grab your stuff or whatever, and then come back to the hospital when you're ready. So I was like, okay. So that's what she did, and my mom actually works at the same place that I had my doctor's appointments, just like a floor down. So I went downstairs, told her that I was going to get induced, and then I went home, did all the stuff that I needed to, called a bunch of people on the way, and then went to the hospital, and I got there around probably noon. And so then they like did my IV and all of that, got me all ready, and around 3, they started the Pitocin, because that's how they decided it would be best to induce me, was just go ahead and start with Pitocin. So people kind of came and went all day, mostly came and stayed, as far as like family and stuff, and started with Pitocin. They started at the lowest dose, and then I think like every half an hour they upped it. And they were like, we're not going to check you that often, because even though we use sterile gloves and everything like that, like we want to be absolutely sure we're not introducing new bacteria up there. So we're not going to check you unless you feel like you're in pain and you like think you've dilated and you need to be checked. But probably like 5 or 6 hours later came, and I still was really only feeling uncomfortable. Like I was having contractions, and they were fairly consistent, but I wasn't in pain. So they were like, we're going to check you just to be sure. It's been a while. We've been opening your Pitocin. We want to see what's going on. So they checked me, and I had come in at a 1.5 centimeters, and you have to get to 10 to have the baby, like, be ready. And I was at a 2. So, like, 6 hours later, I had only progressed 0.5 centimeter on the Pitocin. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. So they started talking about some options that we could try if I didn't start to dilate, but they were like, we can, you know, give it some time if you want, and then like around midnight we'll come back in, we'll check you again, and if you're not progressing, then we can like really look into those if that's what you want to do. And I was like, yeah, I think that's how I want to go about it. So they were like, okay, like you can try walking around if you want or whatever. Like I was already sitting on an exercise ball. So that's what I did. My friend and I walked around the hospital halls for probably about half an hour, and then I started feeling kind of like gross. So I was like, I'm going to go back and brush my teeth. So I did that, and then my nurse came in when I was done, and I was like, should I continue walking? And I asked her, I was like, should I continue walking and try to continue to dilate, or should I get in bed and rest? Like, what do you think would be better? And she was like, honestly, the moms that I've seen get like all the rest that they can do better. So I would suggest that you rest. So I was like, okay. So I laid down. I probably was in too much discomfort to sleep, but I was tired because I had been there like all day and had gotten up early. So I kind of just rested. I talked with my friend, and we all just hung out. My parents were there, my brother, all of that. And then the nurse came in probably half an hour after that-ish, and she was like, I need to adjust your monitors, because they keep these monitors on your belly, especially, like, you don't always have to have them, but if you're being induced at my hospital, you always have to have them. And so, she came in and she had to adjust them because he had, like, moved out of position and they couldn't get his heart rate anymore. So she did that, and then she was, like, putting the blankets back over me, and, because I was laying in bed, and she was, like, talking or whatever, and I felt this pop in like the lower right hand corner of my stomach, and it was really strange. It was very, like, it felt like there was like a bubble down there, like a hard thick bubble, and that it had just like popped. Like, it was crazy. It was so weird, and I heard it. Like, I swear I heard it, and I freaked out because it was really like, it wasn't uncomfortable, but it was so weird to me. And I was like, did you hear that? And she was like, no, what happened? And I told her what happened, and she was like, that was weird. She's like, I didn't hear anything. And then probably no more than like 10 to 15 seconds after that, I started feeling really intense pain and a lot of pressure. So I like jumped out of bed, and I was like, I need to go to the bathroom right now. And so they like unhooked me and let me go into the bathroom, and I started feeling this really intense contraction. And I was like, oh crap, like, this sucks, this hurts. So I'm like sitting on the toilet, rocking back and forth, and my mom comes in and she's like, are you okay? What's going on? And I was like, Mom, like, I'm starting to hurt really bad. And so she like calls out into the other room, and she's like, guys, like, she's like starting to have real contractions. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So she leaves and she comes back, and by the time she had come back, they had worsened. Like, I was probably having them every 1.5 to 2 minutes, and they were getting harder with every single one that I was having. So I'm rocking back and forth. I'm starting to like moan, because it just hurts so bad. And she comes back in again, and she's like, my mom's like, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm really in pain. I don't know if I can do this without the epidural, because my plan all along had been to go natural. And so I was like, I don't know if I can do this without the epidural. And she was like, Sydney, I don't know what to do, because when I was like sane and not in a ton of pain, I had told her, like, don't let me get the epidural. You need to like encourage me to do it natural, because I'm like, it's gonna hurt and I'm gonna have a hard time. She was like, I don't know what to do, like, I don't know if I should just be like, it's okay, you're in pain, you can get the epidural, or if I should just be like, you need to keep going. And I was like, Mom, I don't even care, like, it's fine, let me get the epidural, I will not be upset with you, I will not be upset with myself, like, this hurts so freaking bad. And so she was like, okay, well, can I pray over you? And I was like, yeah. So she prayed over me, and I was like, I need everybody out of the room. So she sent everybody out except for, it was my mom and my nurse. And then once everybody left, they like opened the door to the bathroom, and my mom kind of came back in, and I was like, Mom, I need the epidural. I need it right now. This hurts so bad. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I started at a 2, and now I'm feeling really intense contractions. I'm probably like at a 6 or 7. Like, this is going to get worse, and it's going to get harder, and I can handle it right now, but I can't once it gets worse. So I'm like, Mom, I need the epidural. Like, I'm to the point where I'm almost on my hands and knees, like, begging for that epidural. And my nurse comes in, and she's like, honey, I need to get you on the bed because I need to check you and see where you're at. So I go and get on the bed, and she starts to check me, and she's like taking a little bit longer than normal, and she's like, I can't find your cervix. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go back to the bathroom because I was having another contraction. And like something about sitting on the toilet just helped a lot, like with the pressure. I mean, it still hurt like crap, but it just helped more than being on the bed. So I went back to the toilet, and she's like, I'm gonna go get the charge nurse, and I'm gonna have her check you. So I was like, okay. And so she came back with the charge nurse. I got back on the bed. I'm dreading it by now because I'm sure that I'm gonna have a contraction while she's checking me too. And she does her thing, and she's like, honey, you're at a 10. She was like, we don't have time for the epidural, like, we're gonna have you do practice pushes, you're ready to push. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? And she was like, yeah. She was like, your next contraction, start doing practice pushes. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm like freaking out, and my nurse, I think, is still thinking that I want the epidural, or like still trying to make me aware that I can have the epidural if I want it. And she was like, you know, you still can have the epidural, but like it's gonna take half an hour to get them up here, half an hour for it to work, like you're probably just better off pushing. Which I loved my nurse, I loved my midwife, I loved the staff at this hospital that I went to. They were very good about making you aware that whatever happens is a conversation. They never are going to try to force you into anything. They're going to give you all of the information, and then you make the decision on what you want to do. So if I had said I want an epidural, they would have given me an epidural if I like held out that long. But I didn't want it anymore. I knew that I was at a 10, so I knew that I could just push. And so my next contraction, I started doing a couple practice pushes. They got my midwife in the room. There was like a ton of people, because there was the midwife, and then there was a midwife that was like in training, following the other midwife. And then there was my nurse. There was a nurse that was going to take care of him once he was born. The charge nurse was in there, and I think like one other lady, and I don't even know why she was in there. And then my mom was there, and I was on the bed. And I considered getting out of the bed, but then I was just like, nah, I don't care anymore. So I stayed in the bed, and they were like, this is going to make you feel better because you're going to have something to do, and it's not going to hurt as bad. And I was like, okay. And so I started my practice pushes, and then I started like which were just real pushes. And then it did kind of come to the point where my body just kind of took over, and it's like you couldn't not push if you wanted to. Like my body kind of just pushed, and that's not to say that like that made it any easier. Like it was still horribly painful. There were times when I was having contractions when I wouldn't feel like pushing, so then I was just riding the contraction, and it hurt really bad, but it did help to push some. But I told them, I was like, y'all, I'm gonna poop everywhere. And they were like, no, you're not, and I was like, no, you don't understand, like, I'm going to poop. And they were like, no, like, that is the baby, it's supposed to feel like that. And that is, y'all, like, everybody says it feels, because I knew that you had to push like you were gonna poop. I didn't know that it was going to feel like you were going to poop. Like, it didn't feel like he was coming out of where he was coming out of, it felt like he was coming out of my butt. That's where all of the pressure was. Like, it was really strange. And they were like, no, it's fine, like, you're supposed to feel like that. And I was like, okay. But at that point, even if I had pooped all over, I literally would not have cared. It hurt so bad, it did not matter. And I remember being so angry at everything because I was in so much pain. And so I looked around and I saw all of those like people there, that medical staff, and I was like, why are they, in my head I was like, why are they not doing anything? They're just sitting here smiling at me. They're not even telling me to push, because they didn't give me any directions on pushing. They just stared at me. They were just like, push when you feel like you need to push, because I could feel everything. I think they direct you more like when you're numb. And so, and every once in a while they'd say like, oh, that's the most of his head that I could see, or like, you're doing a really good job, or like, you're doing really good at like staying calm in between contractions and resting and stuff like that. I mean, they would give me little encouragements, but for the most part they were just quiet and I was just screaming. And I remember thinking, what are they doing? Why are they not doing anything at all? And like at one point they were like, we can see his head, and I was like, can't you just pull him out? And they were like, no honey, we can't do that. And I was like, okay. And my poor mom, she was crying, and I remember looking at her and being like, I am having a baby here. If I am not crying, she should not be crying. Which, like, her grandchild is being born and she is watching it happen. Like, that's a beautiful thing. And my mom's emotional anyway, so it's not a surprise that she cried. But I was, like, so mad, because I was like, she's my support person, and I am sitting here doing this and not crying, and she is, and that is not right. And I remember, I didn't, like, cuss or anything. I didn't talk at all. Like, they would ask me questions and I would just completely ignore them. Like, I could make thoughts in my head, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't vocalize anything. Like, all I could do was just moan and scream. And one thing that I never realized about having a baby is that, like, when you're pushing them out, I thought you would just give, like, one good push and their head would just pop out and then they would just slide out. But no. You, like, have to, like, consistently be, like, pushing them. So at one point his head was, like, that much out of me, but I wasn't having a contraction, so I couldn't push. So his head was just stretching it out down there, and that was the most painful part. I don't remember the ring of fire, really, because I feel like I've heard so many people say, like, the ring of fire, it's, like, a real thing, it burns like crazy just for a second, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I really didn't feel that, but I felt his head stuck down there. And I was, like, wishing for a contraction at that point, because I was like, I need to push and get his thing out of me. Because that was painful. Like, even in between contractions, I was, like, moaning at that point, because it was awful. So finally I pushed, and he came out, and they were like, Mama, like, here's your baby, you did it, like, you had him, and, like, they're freaking out, I'm freaking out, my mom is bawling her eyes out, like, it's insane. And so they, like, put him on me. They ended up having to, because they do, an hour of skin to skin right after the baby's born, and that after that they'll, like, take him and, like, wash him and all of that. So they put him on my chest, and his nurse was like, why didn't you cut her bra, or why didn't you take her bra off? Because normally they have, you take your bra off once you start pushing. But my nurse was like, it literally went so fast that there was, like, not time. That was not an option. And so they ended up cutting my bra off, so that I could do skin to skin with him. They cleaned him up some. They delivered my placenta. I was really scared for that. It really didn't hurt. What hurt worse was his umbilical cord, because I could feel everything, and I was very sore and swollen down there, and it was kind of like every time they'd move him, it would, like, swing and, like, rub down there, and that was pretty painful. But delivering the placenta wasn't bad, and then this is, like, almost a whole nother story, but let's just say that I had a very hard time down there. He tore me in pretty much every single way that you could be torn. It took them 2 hours to stitch me up. They used 5 packs of stitches. At some points they couldn't, because I don't know if they would even bother to numb you if you were already numb with an epidural, but I wasn't, so they'd give me a shot every single place that I needed stitches. Well, some places, to numb it. Some places they couldn't reach, she said, with the needle, and so she would just stitch me up with nothing. Like, I just felt everything. That was not fun. She said that with some people, during pregnancy, protein just gets, like, zapped from their body. It's just, like, a thing that happens, sometimes, and so that happened with me, and so I had very brittle skin down there, and so that's why it tore so bad, and this is kind of graphic, but she said that at some points my skin was so thin that she would put in the needle and thread it, and the thread would just tear through the skin, and so she'd have to, like, go through again and, like, go deeper with it. So yeah, that was horribly miserable and awful. Almost as bad as having him, honestly. It was so bad, and it made recovery really difficult for me. But at the end of the day, he was here. He got here at 12:09 a.m. on November 8th, 2018. And he wanted to be a November 8th birthday, or baby, because he was 9 minutes late for being a November 7th, or I guess 10. But yeah, I was in labor. Well, technically they started the Pitocin at 3, and 9 hours later I had him. I pushed for about half an hour. Once the heavy contraction started, it took about an hour and a half to get from 2 centimeters to 10 centimeters. They said that they really have no idea why that pop happened, but it seems to me to be the reason that I started like actual labor. They said it could have been him just shifting, like it could have been like his shoulder was in the wrong position and he shifted it to the right one, and then after that my body just took over. But they really honestly don't know. That's just like a theory that they have. But yeah, so they stitched me up, took me to mother and baby, and I did my recovering and came home. And so, or part of my recovering. And that is my labor and delivery story. It was pretty boring up until the last hour and a half when it was very overwhelming and crazy. And then I had him. And so it was really special. But yeah, so that's pretty much it as far as my labor and delivery story goes. Oh, I don't know if I said he was 7 pounds 1 ounce and 19 and a half inches long. So he was long and skinny and just the sweetest little thing. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this video. If you want a recovery video, I'll talk about that, especially for those of you who are like pregnant. If you want a recovery video, I will totally do that, because I should have looked more into that when I was pregnant, but I didn't. So I might make one of those. I'm thinking about making a breastfeeding video. My son had a tongue tie and we had to get that revised, so I'm thinking about making a video on that. And then just like general update videos, maybe some vlogs here and there, because life is about to get crazy hectic, so I might just bring you guys along. And yeah, so I'm hoping to be making more videos, and that's pretty much it for today, y'all. So I will see you guys in my next video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye, y'all.